10 bone-chilling true horror stories from remote mountains that haunt you tonight. The chilling winds howled through the jagged peaks, carrying with them the whispers of lost souls. In the heart of those desolate mountains, stories spoke of darkness, real darkness, that sunk into the bones, leaving shadows where light once danced. Just the thought of that remote place stirred anxious chills. What lurked in those haunted hills? As night fell, tales from trembling lips turned to reality. One local legend claimed to have seen flickering lights in the dead of night, deep in the woods. People thought they were lost hikers, but no, those lights were something far worse. They were said to be will-o'-the-wisps, luring the unsuspecting to their doom. Lost souls would wander aimlessly, searching for what they never found, leaving behind an eerie silence that made the heart race. Those who followed the glow never returned. Not wise to chase ghosts, old man Jasper would murmur over the crackling fire, his voice steady, yet haunted by his own encounters. Then there was the whispering tree. Towering over the mountains, its gnarled branches seemed like skeletal fingers pointing accusingly at anyone who dared approach. Villagers swore they'd heard voices carried by the wind. Some said it was the spirits of those who wronged it. One woman, brave enough to listen, vanished without a trace. "Don't get too close," they warned her, eyes wide with fear. But curiosity pulled her in, and the last thing anyone heard was a blood-curdling scream that echoed for miles before fading into the night. As the stories slipped into the air like the smoke from a dying fire, the dangers felt tangible, and unsettling tension thickening in the atmosphere. Could these nightly terrors be real? Was it the mountains themselves screaming for justice, or simply the wind playing tricks on weary minds? It made one wonder, to what lengths would your own fear lead you? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The night encroached harder, tangible and suffocating. The moon broke through the clouds for just a moment, illuminating the valleys with a ghostly glow. Shadows shifted, and somewhere beyond the trees, a low growl reverberated through the air, setting every hair on edge. It was then a silhouette broke from the cave, a figure that seemed all too familiar. It stood still, watching, breathing, and waiting for the right moment to pounce. The mountains had secrets, and it seemed they weren't ready to share. Would you dare to find out what happens next? The wind whispered secrets in the dark, stirring leaves like fingers raking across the ground. The silhouette slinked away, melding back into the shadowy mass of trees, leaving behind an unsettling stillness. The air crackled, thick with tension, as if the very fabric of the night awaited its next victim. Marlowe, an eager adventurer, had insisted on a night hike against all warnings. His friends, Keith and Jenna, exchanged worried glances. "It's just a story, right?" He had laughed off their concerns, waving his flashlight dismissively. But deep down, Keith felt a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. "Let us head back," he said, casting a glance toward the ominous tree line. "We don't want to end up like those lost souls." Jenna nodded in agreement, her face blanched with fear, but Marlowe's defiance sparked defiance in them too. "Come on, don't be wimps. We'll just look for the lights." Marlowe prided himself on his bravado, eyes gleaming with excitement, ignoring the gnawing anxiety in his friends' voices. With trepidation, they forged ahead. The beam of Marlowe's flashlight danced ahead of them, illuminating crooked branches and mossy stones. But the deeper they delved into the woods, the more the surrounding sound faded. Only the crunch of leaves beneath their feet filled the void, a haunting reminder of their isolation. Jenna shivered, rubbing her arms against the sudden chill. "Do you guys hear that?" She stepped closer to Keith, whose pulse raced at the echoes in the distance. A low hum, like distant voices intertwined with the rustling leaves, reached their ears, weaving through the silence. It was eerie, almost melodic, and yet it sent chills racing down their spines. "We should turn back," Keith urged, his voice barely above a whisper, but again Marlowe charged ahead, a thrill-seeker unbowed. "Just one more minute," he shouted back, venturing toward the flickering lights that seemed to twinkle in the depths of the trees. And there it was, the glow, a beckoning invitation to pursue. It felt as if it pulsed with the heartbeat of something alive. As they inched closer, the atmosphere thickened, pressing around them like a vice. Shadows morphed, and the trees groaned as if alive, whispering warnings with every breeze. Suddenly, the glowing lights vanished, snuffed out like a candle, leaving them plunged in an unnerving darkness. "Marlowe?" Jenna's voice trembled. "Where are you?" But the call echoed in a silence so profound it felt almost palpable. Panic surged, flooding Keith's veins like ice. "We need to find him," he said, urging Jenna to move. As they retraced their steps, the world felt off-kilter, shadows weaving in ways they shouldn't see. Just then, a scream, raw and filled with terror, slashed through the night. It was a sound that froze them both, riveted to the spot. "Marlowe!" they called out, their voices lost in the cries of the wind. But dread started to claw at their insides. They could feel it, a presence creeping closer, shading their light. "Run!" Keith shouted, the last scrap of rational thought vanishing like the lights that had swallowed Marlowe. They bolted deeper into the forest, branches snatching at their clothes, hearts thundering in their chests. But the mountain wasn't just a simple collection of rocks and trees anymore. It felt alive, alive in a way that conspired against them. Would they ever escape the grip of the darkness? Did the mountains harbor secrets darker than they could ever imagine? And as they dashed forward, the low growl returned, a haunting promise that the night had only just begun to reveal its true horrors. The pounding of their hearts echoed in Keith's ears as he and Jenna sprinted through the twisted maze of trees. Breathless and terrified, they pushed through the thick underbrush, the air cold and stinging against their skin. The smell of damp earth and decaying leaves clawed at their senses, heightening the fear gripping them. "Do you think he is okay?" Jenna gasped, glancing back over her shoulder, her frantic eyes darting into the shadows. "I can't just leave him. We have to keep moving," Keith urged, glancing back too, but all he saw were dark shapes shifting, lurking just beyond the reach of his flashlight. The growl resonated again, closer now, a warning and a threat swirling together in a sinister lullaby. As the path twisted, the faint hum returned, louder and more insistent than before, almost like whispers wrapped in a seductive embrace. It tugged at their minds, inviting them to listen closely. "Keith, what if it's Marlowe?" Jenna's voice quivered, her eyes wide with hope and despair. "What if he is hurt?" "No, we're not stopping," Keith countered, a desperate edge slicing through his anxiety. They stumbled onward, but exhaustion was creeping in. A dumbbell heavy weight settled in his legs, making every step an effort against the suffocating fear. It was then they heard it, the unmistakable sound of splashing water. A river? Could there be safety in the flowing currents? "This way," Keith shouted, leading Jenna toward the sound, praying the water channel might guide them out of the suffocating shadows. But as they approached, the ground shifted underfoot, and the air grew thick with an unnatural stillness. The quiet stole the words from their lips. The normally comforting sound of flowing water turned ominous, thrumming like a warning bell. Keith peered into the heavy darkness, and there was a scene that turned his stomach. The river lay before them, but it wasn't clear or inviting. Its waters gleamed unnaturally, illuminated by an otherworldly glow emanating from deep within its depths. Shapes flickered beneath the surface, twisting like tortured silhouettes, grasping for escape. "Keith, we shouldn't." Jenna hesitated, fear choking her words. "No! We can't go back." The urgency in his voice drowned out the fear. "We have to cross. It's the only way." But as they stood shook their heads, that low growl returned, much louder now. It rumbled under their feet and echoed in their chests, vibrating with a sinister rhythm that sent terror curling in their minds. The shadows grew longer, twisting and contorting until they formed grotesque images, half-formed faces that seemed to scream in silence. A sudden splash shattered the silence, and they both froze. The water erupted, and from it emerged a figure, dripping with darkness, eyes glinting like obsidian. It was Marlowe. "Help me," he rasped, choking on the water that streamed down his face. Panic turned to shock as Jenna let out a strangled cry. But the moment was fleeting. The darkness snapped back, swallowing Marlowe whole before they could react. "Go! Jennifer, we have to go!" Keith screamed, yanking her away from the water's edge, her screams haunting his ears. But as they turned to flee, the whispers grew louder, melding with the growls until a haunting symphony enveloped the night. Terror gripped their chests as they sprinted away from the river, desperate to escape the grasp of whatever force had taken Marlowe. But a new sound joined the chorus of growls, the sound of footsteps behind them, growing louder, relentless. They raced on, adrenaline fueling their flight, but the darkness was alive, embracing them. And just when Keith thought they might be free, the earth trembled beneath them, twisting paths shifting again, a labyrinth that seemed to close around them. "Where do we go?" Jenna cried, her voice breaking. As they stumbled through the trees, hope faded like the dwindling light of their flashlights. In that moment of desperation, Keith's heart sank. The mountains weren't just a backdrop, they were a predator. And then, out of the corner of his eye, Keith caught a glimpse of movement. Something emerged ahead, something he hoped was salvation, or perhaps it would spell their doom. They had to decide: press forward into the unknown, or face the haunted past that clawed at their heels. What awaited them at the intersection of fear and fate? Keith's breath caught in his throat as he spotted the movement, a flicker of light just ahead, dancing through the trees. Hope ignited within him, but an uneasy feeling tightened his chest. "Jenna, look!" he gasped, pointing toward the distant glow. "What is it?" she replied, her voice mingled with fear and curiosity. "I think it could be a cabin," Keith said, feeling an odd mixture of excitement and terror. "Maybe someone's there. We might find help." Jenna hesitated, her brow furrowed with doubt. What if it's not safe? What if something waits for us inside? Better than whatever had taken Marlowe, Keith thought. It's our best shot. We can't just keep running. With one last apprehensive look behind them, they surged forward, adrenaline pushing them through the tangled branches. Each step closer to the cabin sent a chill skittering down Keith's spine. The whispers grew louder, swirling around them. He could almost decipher their meanings, but they were always just out of reach, taunting him, pulling at his sanity. As they approached the cabin, its wooden facade loomed dauntingly in the darkness, the pale light spilling from inside. The door hung ajar, creaking gently in the cool breeze, beckoning them with an eerie allure. "Keith, what if he's in there?" Jenna's voice wavered. "We need to check." "We can't leave him behind," he replied, forcing his voice to steady, though his heart hammered wildly. They exchanged a look, fear mingling with determination. Together, they stepped across the threshold into the dim light. The interior was a jumble of mismatched furniture. Dust-filled beams of light flickered against the cracked walls. A heavy stillness hung in the air, weighing on them. With each footfall, the floorboards creaked beneath their weight, the sound echoing ominously in the silence. "Nobody's here," Jenna whispered, slipping her hand into Keith's for comfort. Or maybe they already were, he thought, scanning the dim corners where the light did not reach. His gut twisted at the thought. Let us check the back, he suggested, pushing open a door that led into a small kitchen. A tattered newspaper sat on the table, faded headlines barely legible. The date suggested it was years old. A chill crept up Keith's spine as he read half-formed words: death, disappearance, terror in the woods. Keith, look at this. Jenna called from the doorway. He turned to find her standing at the back door, which opened onto a darkened porch. Outside, something shifted in the shadow, shapes moving just out of sight. Keith's heart raced again, and he felt the presence of something watching them. He squinted into the blackness, trying to make sense of the flickering forms. Maybe we should just leave. Jenna's voice trembled, breaking the thick silence. No! What if Marlowe needs us? He stepped closer to the door, still unsure if it was a trap or refuge. A sudden gust of wind slammed the door shut, leaving them inside, the whispers now swelling into a deafening cacophony. And then, they both heard it, the unmistakable sound of a voice, distorted and haunting. Help me! Keith's stomach plummeted. It was Marlowe's voice, somehow familiar yet chillingly wrong. Coming from outside? Keith! Jenna gasped, trembling beside him. What do we do? The lights flickered, and for a moment, darkness blanketed the cabin, plunging them into an abyss of dread. They were trapped. The whispers intensified, wrapping around them like a noose, pulling them deeper into the nightmarish reality surrounding them. He knew they had to either confront their fears or face the horrifying truth that lay beyond the doors. But as they readied themselves to step outside, the last remnants of hope flickered under the weight of despair. What awaited them beyond the cabin? And would confronting that voice bring salvation or doom? As they stood on the brink of the unknown, the shadows shifted once more, revealing a figure in the darkness, a twisted version of Marlowe, staring back at them from the edge of the trees. Help! It croaked again. But was it the same Marlowe they once knew, or something far worse? And with that, the choice hung heavy in the air. Would they answer the call, or retreat into the safety of the walls that barely cradled their sanity? The pulse of terror surged through Keith and Jenna as the figure stepped closer, pulsating in the murky darkness. Shadows danced across its features, twisting the contours of familiarity into something grotesque. Help! It was all too broken, a whisper snatched from a nightmare. Keith, that's not him. Jenna squeezed his hand tight, her fingers trembling. The fear in her eyes mirrored his own rising dread. What if it is? He argued, though each syllable felt heavy on his tongue. We have to find out. Before he could react, the twisted figure lunged forward, a lumbering gait turning into a sprint, shouting Marlowe's name with a guttural desperation that sent shivers down their spines. Help me! You have to help me, Keith! No! Jenna tugged at him to retreat, but the part of him that once trusted Marlowe now battled the instinct to flee. Adrenaline coursed, blurring the lines between friend and foe. Hold on, Marlowe! Keith shouted, voice cracking with emotion. He willed himself toward the door despite every instinct screaming to run. Yet each step felt like wading through fear itself. But then, the whispers rose again, more fervent than before. The cabin seemed to breathe, walls closing in as if hungry for their despair. Moments stretched on. Jenna's grip held firm, but she was losing her resolve. Keith, we should tea. It's not safe. He turned to her, desperate. If he is in trouble, if he needs us, how can we just leave him? With another shaking breath, they stepped onto the creaking porch, the shadows roiling around them like mist. The figure halted, the familiar voice dripping with anguish. Yet there was something insidious, lurking just beneath a wrongness gnawing at Keith's gut. Please! You have to! The creature's voice cracked sharply, cutting off as it shifted back into the deeper shadows. They're coming! They'll take you too. Keith took a step forward, tears of desperation stinging his eyes. "What took you, Marlowe? Where are you?" But his questions vanished into the night air, swallowed by the gathering darkness. Only the sinister whispers remained, weaving around them like a thick fog, deepening the grip of fear upon his heart. Sudden movement caught his eye. A multitude of figures emerged from the depths of the trees, faces pale and twisted, eyes wide, and filled with an anchored void-hungry spirits, lost souls drawn by unspeakable terror. "Help us," they echoed, their voices morphing into a maddening chorus. "Marlowe!" Keith called out, but he felt Jenna's grip pull him back, her voice breaking through. "We have to go, Keith. This isn't right. We need to get inside." He hesitated a heartbeat longer, torn between the familiar pleas and Jenna's urgent insistence. Each second pulled him closer to the abyss, and the figures shifted menacingly in the smoky darkness, whispering secrets coated in shadows. "Run!" Jenna screamed, terror cracking through her voice. But before he could respond, a scream pierced the night, a chilling sound that layered horror over the urgency muffling his mind. The twisted Marlowe recoiled, eyes wide with fear, something stark and terrifying flashing behind him. And then it lunged, closer, closer. Time slowed as Keith's mind raced, caught between instincts as if they were the last two standing before an unholy judgment. A harrowing decision hung like a blade above them. Would they step back into the cabin, clinging to false safety, or plunge into the night ahead, facing the twisted echoes of their past? As they stood on the threshold, the shadows swirled, and the chilling voice returned, sharper and more demanding. "Help me before they take all of you." What horror lay ahead, waiting to ensnare them in a night of despair? The darkness curled around them, stifling and heavy. Keith's heart pounded against his ribs as he faced the advancing figure, the growing legion of tormented souls behind it, twisting the air thick with malice. Jenna's breath quickened, her face pale beneath the silvery moonlight. "We have to decide, Keith. Now!" The shifting shadows reflected in her anxious eyes seemed to pull him further into despair. "I can't leave him," Keith whispered, feeling the weight of Marlowe's haunting cries wrap around his soul. "What if he is really here? What if he needs us?" But there was no time for lingering doubts. The grotesque visage surged forward. It opened its mouth again, a gaping maw that didn't seem capable of forming human words, yet the sound that emerged was unmistakably desperate. "Keith! Jenna! Don't let them take you. It's all a trap." In a heartbeat, Jenna yanked his arm, pulling him against the cabin door just as the twisted figure lunged. "Get inside," she urged, and Keith felt her strength blend with his resolve. With a powerful shove, he burst into the cabin. The door slammed shut behind them, echoing like a gunshot, ringing in the silence that swallowed the air. It felt safe inward, yet the reprieve was fleeting. "Did we lose them?" Jenna panted, her eyes darting toward the darkened windows, the tremors in her hands betraying her facade of strength. "Not yet," Keith replied, his voice hoarse. They pressed their backs against the weathered wooden door, breaths mingling in the air thick with tension. Shadows danced outside, whispers slithered through the walls, and dread permeated every fiber of the cabin. Suddenly, a loud thud reverberated against the door, jolting them from their stillness. The figure slammed into it again, distorted shape writhing, as if the shadows around it were alive, seeking entry. "Help!" came the echo, but then it morphed into something far worse. "Help us!" The chorus of souls outside surged like a tidal wave, crashing against the harder shell of their sanctuary. "Keep it together, Jenna," he whispered, gripping her shoulders to steady her. But he could see her lips quivers, could feel her heart racing against his. "We can't stay here. They'll find a way in. What do you suggest?" Her tone hardened, but he appreciated the fire in her words, the fight still there. He thought of Marlowe lost, trapped somewhere beyond the door. What if the figure is actually Marlowe, and he needs us to fight through the souls out there. Or what if it's leading us into a trap? Jenna leaned closer. We have to confront whatever it is together. The ground beneath them trembled. The air grew heavier, weighed by their choices. Then a soft shift of fabric caught his attention. A trail of moonlight illuminating a gap in the corner of the room, a window barely ajar, the perfect escape route. Fresh dread clawed at his throat as he considered the implications of going outside. I guess we have to make a choice. Go out and possibly face Marlowe's twisted fate, or hold our ground, he mused, fear pooling in his stomach like a lead weight. Choose quickly, Jenna said, eyes wide. I can feel it. Whatever is out there is closer. They want us, Keith. A heavy silence fell upon them, as the prospects steeped in darkness clawed at their resolve. A heavy thud boomed against the door again. Help me before they take all of you. The cry morphed into a painful wail, reverberating through the cabin until it felt like the walls themselves might scream. Jenna, Keith breathed, heart racing. What if it's Marlowe? It has to be him. Before he could finish, the shadows shifted violently, as if answering his call, and the door buckled under furious slams. The choice loomed before them, their breath mingling with palpable terror. Could they really venture back into the horrors of the night, unearthing a truth with the power to unravel everything they thought they understood? Are we really ready for this? As the woeful cries crescendoed into a frenzied howl, they grabbed hold of each other, closing their eyes for a fleeting moment. Just outside, a chilling chorus filled the air. Help us before we take you all. In that moment, they knew something darker awaited, something that would shatter their resolve. What awaited them in the heart of that nightmare? The door shuddered violently against the force outside. Darkness pulsed like a living thing around them, thick and suffocating. Keith and Jenna shared a look, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on them like a stone. Okay, we go to the window, he said, the words spilling out before second thoughts could yank them back. If we don't, whatever is out there will break through this door. Jenna nodded, fear tracing her features, but her determination flickered behind it like a flame refusing to die. They sprinted toward the window, the sound of bodies crashing against the door echoing in the small cabin. Every instinct screamed at them to run, to leap into the moonlit night, and face whatever horror awaited. But the very thought felt like madness. What if it was T. Marlowe out there? As they reached the window, Keith pushed aside his doubts and pulled the latch. It creaked open, revealing the wild chill of the night air that sent shivers racing down his spine. He looked back at Jenna, whose eyes were full of both fear and something else, resolve. On 3, he managed, counting down in a shaky voice, his heart racing as he glanced back at the door. 1, 2, 3. They climbed through, falling into the tall grass that parted around them like a watery curtain. The world outside was dim and treacherous, shadows swirling beneath the trees like smoke. They landed hard, gasping. A single movement caught their eyes. A figure flitted between the trees, barely visible but undeniably human. Marlowe? Keith called, panic lacing his tone. The figure hesitated, looking back. No, it's a trap, Jenna shouted, pulling him back just as the figure turned and rushed deeper into the woods. A deep ache settled in Keith's chest. Who was it? Where was Marlowe? With no time to mourn the chances lost, they turned and sprinted away from the cabin-esque grasp. Each step felt weighted by darkness, but the sound of the cabin door splintering echoed behind them, urging them onward in a desperate race against whatever hunted them. Branches snatched at their arms and legs as they navigated the disorienting maze of trees, the urgency of their flight cracking against the eerie serenity of the night. The echoes of both familiar and tortured cries seemed to drift closer, wrapping around them like twisted ivy. Marlowe! Keith shouted again, his voice cracking. The only reply was a startled rustle among the branches. He reached for Jenna's hand, their fingers intertwining, a gesture of solidarity against the encroaching unknown. Where are we going? She panted, chest heaving. Desperation lined her voice. Wherever the screams are in T. He yelled back, though the truth felt hollow. The night grew more alive, alive with terror. Shadows leaped into long-lost faces. Whispers carried on the wind sent chills racing down Keith's spine. He felt the weight of choice heavily on him. In their frantic escape, they stumbled upon a small clearing, a grim tableau beneath the pale moonlight. There lay remnants of something once human: discarded clothes, scattered belongings, a half-burned lantern flickering in the stillness. Jenna froze beside him, eyes wide. We can't stay here. Without warning, from the edge of the clearing, a low growl ripped through the silence. Out of the treeline emerged not just one figure, but many, their eyes glinting wickedly in the moon's glow. They didn't look like souls, they looked like something far more primal, far more terrifying. Keith felt his limbs freeze as he registered their forms, gnashing teeth glinting, desperation turned sadistic. This was the madness he had feared. What if they weren't just souls, but the very monsters that had been born from despair? Before they could react, the creatures charged, and every instinct in Keith screamed to flee deeper into darkness. But where would they run to? As Jenna yanked him away from danger, the shadows surged closer, and the cacophony of desperate cries swirled into a frenzy around them. Would they finally confront Marlowe's reality, or become part of the horrid chorus? The fear was palpable in the air, thick and stifling, as they pushed forward into terror's embrace, where even the bravest shivered. The nightmare was only beginning, and reality hung in the balance. Would they find Marlowe, or was this the end, their last chance fading with the howl of the night? They ran, their feet pounding against the cold, unforgiving ground, a primal dance fueled by fear. Keith felt his heart thudding against his ribcage, matching the rhythm of their escape. Jenna's breath was a frantic gasp beside him, each intake sharp and short, as if she were clinging to the last droplets of air. "Keep going," he urged, but the words were barely out before he heard it, the sound of growling, bestial and menacing, echoing from behind. The creatures pursued them, a cruel chorus carried by the wind, their breaths hot against the cold night. Jenna stumbled, and in an instant, Keith's grip tightened around her wrist, dragging her back to her feet. "We can't stop," he shouted, adrenaline surging through him. They darted into the thicket, branches clawing at their clothes, the scent of wet earth and decay thickening around them. The world felt like a treacherous maze, each shadow twisting and writhing, mocking their plight. They veered left, then right, unsure of where they were heading, as the hunt drew closer. Behind them, the growls turned into snarls, a promise of violence that sent shivers crawling down Keith's spine. "Look!" Jenna cried out, pointing ahead. A faint flicker caught her eye, a lantern swinging from a weathered post. "Maybe someone can help us." Keith nodded, though dread gnawed at his insides. They had to try. They pushed onward, the clearing growing wider, as the lantern's light grew stronger. But as they reached it, their hopes plummeted. The lantern illuminated a battered signboard, creaking slightly in the breeze. It read, "Abandoned all hope," and more chillingly, "No escape." Beneath it lay the remnants of previous travelers' torn clothing, abandoned shoes, and a tattered backpack. Jenna's face fell. "It can't be, they didn't get out?" Before Keith could respond, shadows danced in the corner of his vision. The creatures had closed in, their figures silhouetted against the lantern's glow, eyes glowing unnatural hues. The lead creature moved forward, low to the ground, its snarl vibrating through the air like a dark omen. "Run!" Keith's voice thundered as he pulled Jenna away from the dread of the sign. They fled again into the deeper woods, panic stitching their movements. The growls became howls, echoing like a wicked symphony. They stumbled further into the underbrush. Keith's lungs burned, muscles ached, but they pressed on, spurred by the horror that pursued them. Shadows flitted between trees, a tapestry of dread weaving around them. Something was ahead, a turbulence in the atmosphere, an ancient feeling of something reaching out. Keith, wait! Jenna's voice was frantic, her eyes wide as they approached an old well that jutted out of the ground, moss creeping over the stones like a deceptive cloak. Jenna, we don't have time. But she was already there, peering into the dark void. What if there is something down there? In desperate times, you can't cling to hope, he barked, desperation clouding every word. But the shadows were creeping closer, and he felt the weight of Jenna's hesitation. With a determined grunt, he grasped her arm, forcing her to step back. Come on, we have to. Suddenly, a shriek erupted from the depths of the well, deep and forlorn. It echoed, rising like a specter ready to entwine them in despair. The creatures paused, as if the sound hit them too, confusion weaving through their empty eyes. What was that? Jenna shivered beside him, fear spreading through her body like ice. Keith's heart sank as he realized a part of the horror was still alive down there. We can't lose our way, he muttered, pulling her back toward the trees. Yet even as Keith turned, a realization crashed upon him like an avalanche. They weren't just escaping something. They were crashing into something darker, the very core of whatever had haunted these woods. And as the shadows surged forward once more, he wondered if that scream had belonged to Marlowe, trapped in that abyss. Keith! Jenna screamed, pointing behind him as more figures emerged from the tree-line, their eyes gleaming with ferocity. We need to go. But the darkness had other plans. As they bolted, Keith felt himself torn between the shadowy figures and the chilling cry echoing from the well, and amid the chaos, a horrific truth loomed. Whoever or whatever they were fleeing from would not let them go so easily. With figures closing in from all sides, Keith faced a crushing decision. How could they possibly escape? Would they dive into that abyss, or confront the monsters that claimed this land? In the face of encroaching dread, they pressed on, but now every turn seemed like a descent into madness, and time was slipping through their fingers as a faint glow beckoned from beyond the trees. Would that light be their salvation, or lead them deeper into the nightmarish labyrinth that sought to consume them whole? They sprinted through the oppressive darkness, breathlessly cutting through the dense brush. The chilling howls of the creatures bore down on them, sharpening the urgency of their escape. Keith's heart raced, pulsating an erratic rhythm that mirrored the pounding of Jenna's feet behind him. Each step felt like a countdown, a dread-filled prelude to an inevitable clash with the horror that stalked them. Stay close, he called out, his voice gravelly, tinged with panic. As they plunged deeper into the shadows, the soft crunch of twigs underfoot blended into the relentless symphony of growls behind them. Too close. Each guttural sound pressed against the back of Keith's skull, wrapping his thoughts in a vice of fear. He risked a glance back, taking in the dark figures that rushed through the trees, limbs contorted in a grotesque mockery of human motion. Left now, he yelled, jerking Jenna toward a narrow path that wound through foliage thick and wild. The glow from the lantern faded, swallowed by the relentless night. The path seemed endless, weaving as if the forest itself was alive, conspiring against their flight. Sweat poured down Keith's forehead, stinging his eyes, mixing with the exhilaration that coursed through him. It felt unreal. The very ground seemed to shift underfoot, as if the earth had grown restless beneath them. A set of shining eyes flared up to their right. Keith's stomach knotted. Jenna, don't stop, he urged, dragging her along. But the forest had its own rhythm, and with fresh determination, they rounded another corner, only to crash into an unexpected clearing. Then came the smell, the heavy, metallic aroma of blood mixed with something else, something ancient and rotten. Panic clawed at Keith's throat as he took in the scene before them. A bonfire flickered in the center, caverns of shadow retreating around the flame as pitiful glow. Surrounding the fire was a circle of figures, hunched and gaunt, their faces obscured by the tangle of hair and darkness. They whispered in guttural tones that slithered into his ears, filling him with unshakable dread. Jenna's mouth fell open. "Who are they?" "They might not be human," Keith whispered, his voice quaking. Then, with a primal howl that shattered the pervasive silence, the creatures they fled broke through the edge of the clearing, eyes blazing with hunger and fury. Keith pulled Jenna back into the shadow of the trees, his heart racing faster than ever. They couldn't stay. They had to find a way out. Maybe they'll fight each other? Jenna breathed, the slightest glimmer of hope slipping through her terror. But even as she spoke, a blood-curdling shriek erupted from beside the fire. One figure, tall and wraith-like, lunged toward the advancing beasts, arms outstretched, a desperate attempt to ward off the approaching shadow. Keith felt his breath catch. The senses surged, a sickening feeling of dread distorted the air. In one swift motion, the figure was snatched, pulled sprawling towards the horde. The luminous eyes of the creatures glinted as they tore at their prey, shrieks mingling with howls in a horrifying cacophony. "No! We have to run!" Keith shouted, grabbing Jenna's wrist and dragging her deeper into the trees again, their safety hanging by a thread. Branches reached out like claws, scratching at them as they plunged back into darkness. The sounds of carnage faded behind them, but the malevolent shadows remained, closing in with every frantic step. "Keith!" Jenna gasped, cutting through the spiraling chaos. "What if they take us next?" "Then we won't let them," he snapped, though his own heart lay heavy with doubt. But an unexpected sound broke through the tempest, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to rise from below them, shaking the ground. Keith stumbled, his feet slipping on something slick, something wet and dark. He glanced down and froze. Jenna. The pit of dread in his stomach widened. They stood on the edge of a deep ravine, muddy and treacherous, the sound of rushing water below drowned out by the howls behind them. "Do we jump?" Jenna asked, voice trembling. "Or we find a way back," Keith whispered, eyes scanning the darkness, searching for an escape. Suddenly, the growls intensified as they swung closer, eroding their options minute by minute. The ravine loomed, and with each passing moment, the lurking horrors drew nearer. All hope seemed to hang by a thread, teetering on the brink between despair and possible survival. As they peered into the black abyss below, one question remained unresolved: was plunging into darkness escape, or was it the ultimate surrender to the monsters that haunted this forbidden place? They had only moments to decide. What would they choose? As the growls echoed through the woods, a moment of clarity broke through Keith's panic. The darkness surrounding them felt heavy, but escape seemed impossible, and the looming shadows were a relentless reminder of their impending doom. A shiver shot up Keith's spine, and he remembered the words of the old man Jasper about confronting fear, about facing it rather than fleeing. "Jenna, we need to make a stand," he said, voice steadying. "We can't keep running. Maybe they know something. If we confront them—" But just as he spoke, new terror gripped him, a memory of Marlowe, ensnared in the darkness, calling out in desperation. "But what if they're waiting for us to do just that?" she whispered, glancing back as the shadows pushed closer, a swirling chaos of eyes and growls. Keith's heart pounded as he weighed their options. The ravine was a gaping wound in the earth. He stepped closer to it, feeling the wind whip around him. "If we jump, we'll fall. But jumping might be better than getting caught by those things." His voice dropped to a raspy whisper. "We could survive the fall and find a way out." The growls amplified, the haunting calls of the creatures drawing ever nearer. Behind them, the veil of darkness shifted, figures morphing into something almost tangible. Keith felt the gnawing dread at his gut. It pressed against him like a vice. "Let us do it," Jenna said suddenly, a flicker of fierce resolve igniting in her eyes. With a shared nod, they edged closer to the edge of the ravine, adrenaline coursing through their veins. One last look at the tide of shadows behind them. Each growl and howl vibrated against the bone. Then together, they leapt, The world twisted around them, plunging into a rush of cold air and disorientation. The sudden drop stole Keith's breath, but his instincts kicked in as they tumbled, the ground below rushing up. With a terrible jolt, they hit rolling into a thick bank of mud that cushioned their fall. Gasping and covered in muck, they scrambled to their feet, heart rates pounding like thunder in their chests. The ravine opened into a dark channel, the rushing water barely visible but alive, carving through ancient stone. Willing their bodies onward, they plunged into the lower ground, urgency propelling them further. "Can you hear that?" Jenna whispered as they navigated along the bank, the rushing water drowning out the growls and madness above. "It's different down here. It's quieter." "Maybe we finally lost them," Keith replied breathlessly, though doubt still clawed at his insides. The dimness around them was thick, shadows deepening in the cracks of the earth, but the water flowed freely, untainted by the horrors above. They pressed on until Keith felt a strange pull, a shimmer ahead in the water-esque currents. A light? It flickered like the will-o'-the-wisps. It teased him, drawing him in, coaxing out all his curiosity. "Do you see that?" he asked Jenna, his voice filled with a raw unease. "Yes," she breathed, but this time her face revealed a different emotion, a mix of fear and sorrow. "Do you really think it's safe?" His instincts twitched. "It feels like hope." They inched closer, but impacts echoed behind them again. A thunderous crashing told them that whatever had pursued them was close, no longer confined to the darkness above. Time ran out. Desperation thrummed deep in his blood. He could feel whatever nightmare they had escaped was beginning to uncoil itself, ready to strike. They reached the pool, the light brightening as they arrived at its cusp. Its edge glimmered with phosphorescence, alive and inviting, urging them to liberate themselves from the chase. "We have to do something now," he muttered. "Maybe we can swim through?" Jenna said, her voice fraught with determination. Keith nodded. "We don't seem to have a choice." With one last glance at the encroaching shadows, they plunged into the luminous depths, wrapping around them like the embrace of a storm. The freezing water engulfed them, a shock that sent shivers through their bones. The world above faded, and the darkness receded. As they swam deeper, the illumination grew warmer, pushing back the remnants of the shadows. A sense of freedom settled on the currents, a whispering promise filling their lungs with desperation, chasing them forward. And then came clarity. Up ahead, a faint arch opened in the rocks, a way out. "There!" Keith shouted into the water, desperation stitching his resolve as they swam toward it. They burst through the surface near the shore, gasping for air, limbs heavy but adrenaline-fed as they dragged themselves onto solid ground. They collapsed on the grass, gasping, the night humming around them, eerily quiet yet tinged with peace. Keith turned back, expecting to see shadows creeping toward them, but beyond the bright pool the moon glowing down, just silent, empty woods. "No way," he breathed, disbelief washing over him. Jenna smiled a shaky smile. "We did it. We made it." In that moment, a weight lifted. Hope returned, flickering in their eyes. They weren't safe just yet, but they survived. They had chosen to confront their fears, but where was Marlowe? The thought rippled through Keith's mind, a stark reminder, the weight of unresolved ties still looming. "We have to find him," he uttered, pulling Jenna's attention. "Keith, we don't know what's out there," she warned. "I can't leave him behind." Not again. The reality of their choice pressed against him, but the memory of Marlowe's pleas for help surged in his heart. He felt an anchored need, personal responsibility. As they trudged toward the tree line, still shivering from their swim, Jenna grasped his hand. "Then we'll do it together." Their path remained untrodden, but full of purpose. Their terrifying experience in the woods had changed them. They felt the power of choice and the weight of courage. With each step, they tapped into that courage, prepared to face whatever haunted those mountains, whatever lay ahead. They may have escaped the clutches of darkness this time, but the story wasn't finished yet. A mix of resolve and fear cradled them as dawn began to break, the mountains quietening. With new hope brightly illuminating their hearts, they moved forward, speaking Marlowe's name into the rippling shadows. Their adventure had only just begun as they began their relentless search for their friend. Something stirred among the trees. The sun peeked through, casting a golden light, revealing both shadows and truths, a reminder that every story finds resolution eventually. You need to subscribe now, so you don't miss the next chapter of this exclusive journey. This is the moment to show your support. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm, and keep these stories coming. And don't forget to flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about what happens next. Instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share, because true fans know the importance of keeping this community alive.